Thank you. Good evening, students. Welcome back to our discussion on GST. So we were discussing on charge, the chapter charge, and we were discussing on the charge under reverse charge mechanism. So we have gone through to a substantial extent on the notification of reverse charge for services. We have completed notification number 13, but there are certain other services which we will cover it. And we have also discussed extensively on what happens on when the charge is on a specific reverse charge, which is called renting of immovable property, renting of a renting of motor vehicle with fuel, and when there is a reverse charge of goods transport agency. So these two services we have covered intensively. Now we'll proceed further with next reverse charge, which is remuneration to directors. Okay, so we saw that there was one line or one uh, para which says that when a director provides services to a company, then the company has to pay GST on that under reverse charge mechanism. So what happens generally, we should also understand the various clarifications which has been issued by the GST department, because these clarifications is given considering that there was some confusion. So we'll have to focus on the clarifications also and then see if reverse charge is applicable or no. Class. So we'll have to decide on the quantum of GST considering the reverse charge mechanism on the circulars and the clarification which has been issued. So there is a clarification issued with respect to remuneration to director. We said when a director provides any services to the company in his non-salaried capacity, then that is liable to reverse charge. So whether director is an employee or not, that is a question, new question which comes in. If director is an employee, then he is covered under Schedule 3. If he's covered under Schedule 3, then there will not be reverse charge. So services by an employee to employer is under Schedule 3, that will not come. But if there are any independent directors or other directors who are not employee, then that will be liable to reverse charge. So the bifurcation is simple, that decide first we have to know that director providing any services to the company is the service. Now this service could be of two types. First, it could be that the company, the director is an employee of the company. So that service is exempted because it is excluded under Schedule 3. Other than employee, if he's providing any other services, that is liable to reverse charge. Now, how do you decide that? If it is ascertained that director is an employee, then activities performed in the course of employment are not liable to GST. That is clear. That is what the circular also is saying. Now to check whether you have an employee-employee relationship, because director is the same person. And now whether he's providing in the capacity as employer, employee, or he's providing in non-employee capacity, how do we know? So that's why the circular says that to decide that one of the mechanisms is to check what is the tax deduction at source. That is the TDS which is deducted under the Income Tax Act on this payment to the director. This is under which section? If this is given under section 192, 192 is the section under income tax for deduction of tax on salary payment. Okay, so if the TDS is deducted under income tax under section 192, it means that this is a employer-employee relationship. On that value, GST will not apply. Okay, on the value on which TDS is deducted. So if 1 lakh is a salary and you're deducting TDS, say at 15,000 rupees, then that 1 lakh is in the nature of employer-employee relationship. On that, GST under reverse charge will not come. Same 1 lakh rupees is paid, but TDS is deducted under 194J. It means this is not in the course of his employment, but in the course of his providing any professional services. So if he's providing any services in the nature of professional services, then on that 1 lakh, GST under reverse charge would come in, because this relationship is of a non-employee basis. So on that basis, reverse charge would attract when you deduct TDS under 194J. So clear? Got it? This circular clarifies the mechanism to decide whether the director is an employee of the company or director is not an employee of the company. Moving forward, we'll understand what are the important points to be considered while dealing with RCM. There is no partial reverse charge. Okay, once they say in the notification that these services are covered under reverse charge, then 100% it has to be covered under reverse charge. There's no option to partly pay by the service provider and to partly pay by the service receiver. That is not possible. So fully has to be paid by the service recipient itself. But in sir, so question in the previous aspect, Ninshi Sakshena is asking, but sir, in both the cases, TDS is deducted. Yes, because the TDS deduction happens under Income Tax Act, right? So under Income Tax Act, if it is employee services, still you have to deduct TDS. If it is professional services, still you have to deduct TDS. So both the cases, TDS has to be deducted. So we will have to comply with the TDS provisions of the Income Tax Act itself. Basis that we can decide whether this is a what kind of contract, what kind of arrangement this is. When it is covered under 194J, then tax will be paid by company. Yes, if it is deducted under 194J, then tax will be paid by the company. That is called reverse charge. Any other questions with respect to directorship? Okay. Since I don't see any questions, let's proceed on the important pointers on RCM. There is no partial reverse charge. It is 100% reverse charge to be paid by the service recipient. All taxpayers required to pay tax under reverse charge have to mandatorily obtain registration, and the threshold exemption is not applicable, right? Because you have seen the categories of reverse charge. It says if this is the particular service recipient, like in case of a GTA, if it's a factory, now they have not taken registration, but because they have taken services from a GTA, they have to pay under reverse charge. Now, can they say that my threshold limit for registration is below the limit, so I will not register? They cannot say this, because once you have to pay under reverse charge, you have to take registration. For taking registration, there the criteria will not be that you are below the threshold limit, so you'll get exemption. No. So they can't do this. They have to always pay the GST under reverse charge, take the registration and pay it. That is the criteria for reverse charge. The second other aspect is payment of taxes under RCM cannot be made with utilization of ITC and has to be made in cash. The reverse charge, what we pay, okay? For this, you will have to have an understanding on ITC. I'll give you a brief understanding here. Input tax credit means the tax which is levied by your vendors and your suppliers. So when they raise an invoice to you for goods or services, they will charge GST on that. So you will pay to them the value of the invoice plus the GST. Now, once you have paid this GST, this is not a cost for you. This gets added up to your asset. It's an asset to you. So it is called as input tax credit. So you are claiming this credit and keeping it with you. This accumulation on your purchases is called input tax credit. This credit, what you will do when you make any sale or make any supply, that payment on that will be offset with this input tax credit. Okay, so this is the concept of input tax credit, saying that whatever ITC is available to me, I can utilize that for payment of my output tax. So whenever you make any sale, you can collect it from your customer, but by paying to the government, you don't have to pay the cash which is collected from your customer. You can pay out of this credit which is accumulated. This is called input tax credit. So that is the point what you're saying, that payment of tax under reverse charge, right? Like on my output tax, I can utilize the input tax credit. So similarly, everybody will ask that, okay, this reverse charge mechanism I have to pay, but I have already the input tax credit. I will utilize this and pay this. No, that is not possible. RCM, reverse charge mechanism, tax on CGST, SGST, or IGST on the reverse charge has to be made payment by cash itself. You cannot utilize your input tax credit. And the recipient can take the credit of tax paid on inward supplies liable to reverse charge once the recipient makes payment to tax in cash. So it is simple. Had the supplier charged you GST, you will claim the credit. Correct? Now, in this case of reverse charge, the supplier has not charged, but the recipient has paid on his own account because he is liable to pay. So the payment of RCM, once he makes, he can claim that as an input tax credit. Okay. So reverse charge mechanism works that you get an invoice on which RCM has to be paid. So you take it and pay it, right? Once you pay it, that gets added to your input tax credit. It gets added to your input tax credit. You can claim the credit of this. Okay. Sir, can we take ITC in RCM? Yes, we can take ITC in RCM. We can take, but we cannot pay from the RCM the IT. We cannot pay the tax on RCM from the ITC. But once we pay the tax on that RCM, we can claim it as an input tax credit. We had discussed that when an individual or dealer is unregistered, then the transaction will be exempt. That will be only in respect of a GTA. Okay, that is only in respect of a GTA. But in case of others, it will not be exempt. So exemption, Anmol, is not that on all the services I said it is exempt. It is only once it is for specific categories. Say in lawyer services, we said it is exempt. So only when a lawyer provides services to any person who is not registered, then it is exempt. Or a GTA provides service to somebody who is not registered, then it is exempt. In all other cases, it will be taxable itself. Yes, Harish, the taxable person can claim the ITC after making the cash payment RCM. So director are providing renting of immovable property services. Is it not chargeable under RCM or we have to pay FCM? There is an amendment getting bit of confusion, sir. Okay. So on any kind of renting of immovable property service, it is chargeable under reverse charge itself because this is a service provided by the landlord who is a director to the company, right? So in that reverse charge will come in. Can we take ITC in all cases? We will discuss ITC. That time you will get to know that because ITC itself is a detailed chapter. You will get to know in detail what input tax credit can be taken and what cannot be. Only GST payers to government can take only GST. Gunjan Kumar, kindly reframe your question. I'm not able to understand that. Notes for this class and the previous class will be provided to you. Point number 4. Point number 4 is once you get a reverse charge bill, say you get a bill from a lawyer, okay, you have to take this bill and pay the GST under reverse charge. Yes, we know this, we have to pay under reverse charge. So you take the bill, pay the tax under reverse charge mechanism. Once you make the payment of the reverse charge through cash, because that cannot be made through credit, you pay it through your cash. Okay, you have to make payment in your cash ledger. From cash ledger, you can make the payment. Once you make this payment, this can be claimed as a credit. Okay, because on this is a input invoice for you. So on all input invoices, we can claim the credit. This is also one of the input invoice, just that the supplier is unregistered and you are paying taxes on his behalf. So once you pay it, that amount what we have paid under reverse charge can be claimed as an input tax credit. So that is point number 4. So once we pay under RCM and when we get ITC for that, can such ITC be used for paying then RCM or is that used for FCM? Once you claim that ITC, that can be used only for paying off taxes under FCM, not under RCM. RCM in all situations cannot be paid through credit. It has to be paid through cash. In case of house rent, why pay? Because if it's a commercial rent, if it's a commercial house, we have seen in the reverse charge that if it is a trade, if it is a reverse charge, there was one category of renting of immovable property. If it is used for business, then it has to be paid. If GST is to be paid, then for what? From those whose pocket it will be deducted, company or director. It will be deducted from the companies itself. They will not make any deduction. So This is not like a TDS that when I make payment of TDS, I'm deducting from the payment of the supplier. But reverse charge is not any deduction. This is an additional tax. If some person has provided you a service of 1 lakh, you will deduct 10,000 and pay. That 10,000 is called TDS under income tax. But for GST purposes, on that whole value of 1 lakh, even though you have paid them after TDS, that's a different issue. The value of the service is 1 lakh. On that 18%, 18,000 has to be paid by the recipient. They don't have to deduct it because once they make the payment of this 18,000 on that 1 lakh invoice, this 18,000, they will make the payment and they will get the credit also. So they don't have to make any deduction from the payment to the supplier. No threshold limit for RCM. Is RCM GST paid only in cash? Yes, only in cash online. So online through cash itself. Cash, when I say it's not physical cash, it is through your bank account. There are two modes of paying any tax. One is through input tax credit. One is through your cash. Cash means includes bank also, not exactly cash itself. Through making payment through bank is also called as cash. So non-utilization from your input tax credit is payment through cash itself. Nenshi Saxena, I didn't understand what was your last message. Now, apart from this, there are other RCM. In our RCM notification, we had discussed the RCM, but there were some categories which we left off because we had come back to the GTA service. So we will discuss on the other services as well. Supply of generator service attracts RCM, and the supplier of generator has to collect and pay through RCM. Supply of generator service as such does not require RCM. Okay, so on the RCM notification, we had discussed yesterday till GTA and services provided by way of renting of motor vehicles. Again, I will repeat this. Any services provided by way of renting of motor vehicles designed to carry passengers where the cost of fuel is included in the consideration charged from the service recipient provided to a body corporate. So they've said the service rent is provided to a body corporate itself. This way, we said that any body corporate which receives it will have to pay the reverse charge. Now, who should be the supplier? Any person other than a body corporate who supplies the service to a body corporate and does not issue an invoice charging central tax at the rate of 6%. So if he's charging anything other than, if he's charging, he should not charge the 6% rate. If he charges, then it will be under forward charge. If it does not charge, it will be under reverse charge. Apart from that, other services are services which are supplied by any person by way of transfer of development rights or floor space index. So if a landowner provides a development right to the builder, then the builder or the promoter has to pay GST under reverse charge. Then if there is any long-term lease of land, okay, there's a land which is given on lease. Generally, government gives it, the lease of land for more than 30 years to any person against consideration in the form of upfront amount called as premium, salami, cost or price, and any periodic rent for construction of a project. So any kind of leasing for which you make the payment will be again under reverse charge mechanism. Then services supplied by an insurance agent to any person carrying on insurance business. So insurance agent, if he's a insurance agent and he's providing services to any person who's carrying any insurance business, okay, then the insurance company has to pay GST under reverse charge basis. Do ITC on RCM can be used to pay tax under forward charge? Yes. Once you pay the reverse charge and discharge it through a cash ledger, that gets added to your ITC. That ITC you can use for making payment of taxes under forward charge. Okay. So long-term lease of land, 30 years or more by any person to a promoter is liable to reverse charge applicable on the promoter. Services supplied by insurance agent. So insurance agent provides insurance service agency services and he gets commission from the insurance company. On that, the insurance commission, the taxes on that insurance commission has to be paid by the insurance company. Similarly, a recovery agent, a banking may, if some loans is not cleared, then they appoint a recovery agent for recovering the loan. So that services of a recovery agent is borne by the banking company. The recovery agent provides his services of recovery and provides it to the banker. So if he does not collect GST, if he does not charge GST, that's why the burden of these recovery agents is shifted on the bank itself. The banker has to pay taxes on this under reverse charge mechanism. Then a music composer. Supply of services by a music composer, photographer, artist are like by way of transfer of permitting the use of enjoyment of copyrights. So a music composer, composes a music, photographer takes some photographs, the artist or the like, and they provide services to any music company, producer or the like. So if these services photographer is provided to a music company, then the music company which uses this services of a music composer, photographer, and artist will be paid by the music company itself. So the artist will not charge any GST. The music company will pay the GST under reverse charge. Then the next category is a supply of services by an author. Now, what is this? Supply of services by an author by way of transfer or permitting the use of enjoyment of a copyright. Once an author writes a book, it becomes a copyright. Now, if he wants to publish that his writing should be published, then he has to give his right to a publisher. Okay, so this provision of a right to the publisher is under reverse charge when the author is the service provider and the receiver is a publisher who is located in a taxable territory. So we have seen the taxman books and a lot of other books which comes in, which wherein the author is somebody and this publisher just does the printing of the book. Okay, but this publisher publishes the book and markets a lot of services which he gets, right? And the author just makes one of the service provided to the author that he gives the script, which is the main body, right? He has to write a book. The author will write the book. When an author writes a book and gives it, so the publisher is the receiver, right? So that's why he gives the money. So we knew this, right? Yesterday, a person who gives money is the service receiver. So publisher gives money to the author. So he is a service receiver. So this author or the author will not pay GST. The publisher will pay GST under reverse charge. But there is a proviso under this section which says that nothing contained in this entry shall apply where the author has taken registration. If the author himself has taken registration and he files a declaration within the time prescribed with the jurisdictional CGST or SGST officer that he exercised the option to pay service tax, the GST on the services under 9.1 or 9.2, under forward charge, basically. If the author gives a declaration that I will pay taxes and I don't want the publisher to pay, then the author can pay the taxes on that. Okay. And that he will comply with all the provisions of the GST and they apply to a person liable for paying the tax in relation to the supply of any goods or services or both, or that he shall not withdraw the said option within a period of 1 year. So he will be in registration not for only one transaction, but he'll be continuously registered and at least for 1 year he will be registered. If he gives that declaration and he makes a declaration in form GST INV1 to the publisher, then the author himself will pay. If he does not make any declaration, that the taxes on that author services provided to the publisher will pay under reverse charge mechanism. If insurance company gives salary to the insurance agents, so insurance agents can't be employees of the company, right? An employee cannot do a agency business. So that's why agency business will be separate and employee will be different. So service agent, this insurance agents are generally not the employees of the company. Service receiver not paying tax only pay GST service provider in accordance to Act. So if he does not pay, then the liability is still on him. Secondly, he cannot claim the credit because there is a time limit to claim this input tax credit. If he does not pay this taxes on time and does not claim it on time, then the GST will be lost. Service receiver not pay tax, only pay GST. Service provider in accordance to this act. So that is answered. Okay, so author providing services to publisher generally under reverse charge, unless you have to see whether the author has given a declaration. Okay, in this invoice itself saying that the author has taken its own registration and that he exercised the option to pay the taxes under the forward charge. So if the author pays under forward charge, then no reverse charge will come. Then supply of services by the members of the overseeing committee. So there is an overseeing committee. Any services of these committee members providing any service to the Reserve Bank of India, right? So RBI appoints this committee and these committee members make any suggestions to the RBI. Then still it is not liable to reverse charge. Then services supplied by a direct selling agent other than a body corporate or partnership or a limited liability to bank or non-banking financial institutions. What services they'll provide? Individual direct selling agents other than a body corporate partnership or a LLP. So individual who provides user direct selling agents other than a body corporate means any individual is providing any services to a banking company or an NBFC, then this individual service will be paid by the banking company itself. So individually direct selling agents other than a body corporate or LLP. These services offer direct selling agents will be owned by the company itself. Then services supplied by a banking facilitator. A banking facilitator provides any services to a banking company. Then again, the reverse charge will come on the banking company. Then an agent of business correspondent. An agent of a business correspondent provides any services to a business correspondent located in the taxable territory. Then it will be liable to GST. These things are very important because question for these can come up from any of these line items. So you need to be aware that what are all the reverse charge which is applicable. Okay. Services of lending of securities under the securities lending scheme. Okay. So a lender who takes the services, a person who deposits the security, who is the lender? Person who deposits the security is registered in his name or in the name of any of the person duly authorized on his behalf with an approved intermediary for the purpose of lending scheme. So when for the purpose of lending to the banker, the lender deposits certain securities which is registered in names or in the name of any of the authorized representative. So if any action taken by that person he will not be responsible. So the lender should be a person who deposits the securities. In that case, the borrower, that is the person who borrows under securities lending scheme, he has to pay GST under reverse charge. Apart from that, so we have seen that in all kinds of services are covered under reverse charge. Now, there is one specific mention in the integrated GST. Apart from these services under reverse charge, IGST says that if you make any service supplied by any person who is located in a non-taxable territory. Now, who will be located in a non-taxable territory? A foreigner. Okay, a service provided by a person who is located in a non-taxable territory, a foreigner, a lawyer, or somebody who is providing services. Okay, he's a provider and the receiver. If a receiver is located in a non-taxable territory, right? So if he goes to Goa, that is a different territory. So any kind of importation of services from any person outside India to India, we said import of goods is liable to GST because at the customs duty itself, at the time of clearance of goods, customs plus IGST will be applied. Similarly, in case of services, you have to self-assess and decide that you are liable to paying tax under reverse charge mechanism. So you will have to include it. So any service supplied by any person who is located in a non-taxable territory to any other person other than a non-taxable online person, from non-resident to non-resident, nothing. But a person who is supplied in a who is a resident and the receiver is a resident, then the supplier and the receiver matches and recipient will be the service provider. That is the person who is located in the taxable territory. So that was all on the notification of reverse charge. So 10 may company and LP partnership provide service, then not from 10. Supply of services by a member of overseeing company. So 10 and 11, 10 cannot be a company. It is a member service supply of services by the member of overseeing committee, which means that members there cannot be a company. Point number 10. The question asked was, can 10 be a company? No, 10 cannot be a company. It will always be an individual. What does business facilitator means? A business facilitator is a person who helps in forming of the business, growing the business, and assisting the company in business formation. So he's a business facilitator. So if author takes registration but does not give declaration to pay tax under common tax, then RCM apply or no? See, if the author is paying under FCM, then it is obvious that he will pay it with raising an invoice. So once he raises an invoice and he charges GST, then you know that the author is registered. Even if it's not registered, it's better for you to ask the author whether you are registered. If he says no, then you have to pay under reverse charge. But if he says yes, then ask him what is the declaration you are given, because there is a circular which says no. The notification says that if you are an author providing services to a company, then you, an author, has to give me an invoice, give me the invoice, and you have to be registered. So whether you are registered or no, simply you are raising on reverse charge. If you are paying GST, then there'll be a double of effect for you because the supplier collected taxes wrongly and you have paid the taxes extra. So you will have to claim that credit on that and pay the taxes twice. What does taxable territory means? The territory on which tax is payable. So means the taxable territory means that on a transaction of supply, a GST is paid under reverse charge, but they have specifically used that when it is a taxable territory, which means that if he is within the limits of India, then you have to pay GST on that. So that was all on reverse charge mechanism. So those were the important pointers on reverse charge mechanism. Now we'll come back to other types of GST, what is applicable. Okay. So before that, we have some questions over here. पॉइंट नंबर 16 को हिंदी में एक्सप्लेन कर दीजिए. पॉइंट नंबर 16 क्या बोलता है कि सिंपल है, अगर कोई लेंडर है, ओके, 16 says that services of lending of securities under securities lending scheme, कि there are some securities you can lend it, then the borrower who takes it on loan basis, he has to pay some amount. So in that case, the borrower is a recipient, so borrower को reverse charge pay करना पड़ेगा. Okay. Now coming back to our slide on other important points. Now 9.1, 9.2, 9.3 we have discussed. 9.4 we will discuss later on. There is another clause called 9.5, which is on a e-commerce company. So 9.5 says that any e-commerce company, okay, some specified services are there, that if such services are provided through an e-commerce company, the taxes, like we had discussed yesterday on Ola and Uber, it is under an e-commerce model. Now the Ola and Uber has to pay taxes on behalf of the taxi person. So how does the model work? First of all, you have to understand that. Say there is a supplier. Now supplier don't know the customer, but he wants to do business. So that's why these e-commerce companies come, our marketplace comes in. They say that we will market your goods. We will do our best to ensure that your goods are being sold. But you have to list your products on our website. So this supplier will list his products on Amazon. And Amazon is an e-commerce company because it is trying to connect the supplier and the receiver. So it tries to connect the receiver or the customer who is there. Now this customer and supplier not interacting directly through the e-commerce portal, they are interacting. So once the customer places an order, the supplier supplies the goods directly to the customer. He will directly supply the goods to the customer. So this is a concept of e-commerce model wherein we will display the online in his online platform, the product information, marketing, promotion, and provide user interface. And his revenue is that he takes a commission from this suppliers. So once he takes commission from the suppliers, he becomes an e-commerce because he is providing connecting supplier and customer through online platform. Here, this is e-commerce company. Now, when a supplier, typical example of taxi driver provides services through Uber to the customer. Now, on who is the service provider? In this case, the taxi driver. Will the taxi driver pay GST normally? No. Correct. So taxi driver will not pay the GST because he will say, I'm not registered, I don't know to register anything. So that's why this e-commerce companies come in picture to connect these taxi drivers to the customers. So the taxes which is to be paid by this taxi provider, because it is under reverse charge, it is not under reverse charge. This is not there under reverse charge, right? Because we didn't see anywhere that taxi drivers taxes has to be paid by the receiver, unless it is only one category of motor vehicle with cost of fuel. So normal taxi driver will not give his taxi and say that you give me a fixed rate and I will charge you. So it will be a bigger companies who will have fleet of cars. So that is under a single taxi driver providing services Uber to a customer, he will not raise an invoice. So they've said that the e-commerce company, guys, you have a good network of all the taxi drivers, and you know that what is the service being going on, what is the value. So you only collect the taxes from the customer on behalf of the taxi driver. ओके सो टैक्सी ड्राइवर के बिहाफ में ऊबर पैसा कलेक्ट करता है, ऊबर टैक्स कलेक्ट करती है और बताती है अपने कस्टमर्स को कि आप मुझे टैक्स पे, मैं गवर्नमेंट को टैक्स पे करूंगा ऑन बिहाफ ऑफ द ड्राइवर. ठीक है, सो दैट्स हाउ ई कॉमर्स कंपनी वर्क्स. सो फर्स्ट वी अंडरस्टूड रिवर्स चार्ज. वहां पे दो पार्टी है, सप्लायर और रिसीवर. सप्लायर नॉर्मली 9192 में पे करता है, रिसीवर 9394 में पे करता है. दिस इज रिवर्स चार्ज. बट नाउ अभी तीन पर्सन इन्वॉल्व है, सप्लायर, रिसीवर एंड ई कॉमर्स कंपनी. सप्लायर और रिसीवर को ई कॉमर्स कंपनी जोड़ती है, एंड ई कॉमर्स कंपनी हैज रिकॉर्ड ऑफ द सप्लायर. सो द सप्लायर pays the taxes on behalf of the e-commerce company. Okay. What if it's a normal taxi driver and he's not registered? Then he will have to pay GST on his own benefit, on his own transaction. He has to see his turnover. If his turnover exceeds 40 lakhs, he will have to register and pay taxes under forward charge mechanism. Now, e-commerce company runs a lot of services. So all of those services cannot be covered under the gambit of 9.5. 9.5 says that e-commerce has to pay on case of a specified services. So that's why the notification on reverse charge says that what are all those services on which GST has to be paid under reverse charge mechanism. Okay. This is given through a notification जिसका notification number है 17 of 2017. So 17 of 2017 has a specific list of services which says that what are all the services on which reverse charge mechanism GST has to be paid. E-commerce company has to be pay the tax on behalf of the supplier. First is transportation of passengers by a radio taxi, motor car, maxi cab, motorcycle, omnibus, or any other motor vehicle. So basically cabs, motor cabs, maxi cabs, Ola, Uber हमने देख लिया है, ये सब इसके अंदर आ जाएंगे. But what all they do services of motor cab, motor car, maxi cab, motorcycle, because आपको टू व्हीलर भी कभी कभी Uber में मिलते हैं. So any of these services provided by a e-commerce company, then the e-commerce company has to pay taxes on that. Then any services of providing accommodation in hotels, inns, guest houses, clubs, campsites or other commercial places meant for residential or lodging purposes. अगर मैं मेक माई ट्रिप में कुछ मेरी साइट डालता हूँ, एयरबीएनबी में मेरी साइट डालता हूँ, एंड द कस्टमर कम्स एंड स्टेज इट, so we are getting connected through this Airbnb or booking.com. Okay, so this is a e-commerce provider. So this e-commerce operator will pay the taxes on behalf of the landlords who are providing their premises. Okay, then supplied by way of housekeeping, such as plumbing, carpenting. So plumbing, carpenting, matlab all of the services which is provided through their app. Okay, urban clap जो आपको प्लम्बिंग और कारपेंटरिंग सर्विस देता है, तो प्लम्बर तो टैक्स पे नहीं करेगा, प्लम्बर के बिहाफ पे अर्बन क्लैप विल पे टैक्सेस टू द गवर्नमेंट. देन सप्लाई ऑफ रेस्टोरेंट सर्विसेज, जब हम जोमेटो से ऑर्डर करते हैं, दैट इज अ सप्लाई. अब जब आप रेस्टोरेंट जाओगे तब आप रिवर्स चार्ज पे नहीं करोगे, लेकिन क्योंकि रेस्टोरेंट इज प्रोवाइडिंग सर्विसेज डायरेक्टली, दे विल चार्ज अंडर फॉरवर्ड चार्ज. बट इफ दैट सर्विसेज ऑफ दिस restaurant is provided through a Zomato, then Zomato has to pay taxes on that on behalf of the restaurant. So whether restaurant is registered or not doesn't matter. अगर रेस्टोरेंट ई कॉमर्स कंपनी से थ्रू अपने गुड सप्लाई करता है तो वो निश्चिंत रह सकता है, लेकिन परेशानी किसको है? परेशानी है जोमेटो को, क्योंकि जोमेटो को इसके ऊपर पैसा देना पड़ेगा. Whether Amazon and Flipkart also work in this model? Yes, they work in this model itself, but they are not under this e-commerce because उनके services यहाँ पे नहीं है. where you see if you're buying any clothes from Zomato, from Mintra, or from Flipkart, that service is not covered under this. So the supplier only has to pay. So only this one, two, three, four services. एक, दो, तीन, or चार. Only on these four services, you have to pay GST by the e-commerce company. Do you have to remember important notifications? What I'm saying, you have to remember. Like 13 for reverse charge, 17 for e-commerce. These notifications you have to remember. Security guard company doesn't come in this charge. Security guard company comes under reverse charge. They don't come under this because there is no any kind of technology or online platform which is available for a security guard. So that will not be under reverse charge. Clear? This was on e-commerce operator. Now, based on this restaurant services, because earlier e-commerce used to operate, but restaurants were not tagged. So then in 2021, they said that all this online aggregators for food delivery, they are more better. So we will tell them to pay taxes on behalf of this restaurant companies. Now, after this notification came, there was a circular whose number is 167. Circular number 167 says clarifies lost of restaurant e-commerce services. E-commerce companies not to collect TCS in respect of restaurant service so notified. So if earlier even now all e-commerce companies have to collect some tax called as TCS and pay it to the government on behalf of the supplier. Okay. This is called a concept of TCS under GST, not the income tax. Income tax mein you will deduct, but apart from that, under GST also, if you are providing any kind of services through your e-commerce, food delivery through e-commerce, then the e-companies should not collect TCS in respect of restaurant service so notified. So they will have to pay it by their own. They cannot collect it from the restaurant services. So e-commerce companies not to collect TCS in respect of restaurant service so notified. Then e-commerce are not required to take separate registration. So they don't have to take a separate registration because earlier they were paying under TDS and they were having other services on which they were paying taxes under forward charge. So that will continue. They don't have to take a separate registration. E-commerce companies to pay tax on any restaurant services supplied through them. So except one exception, which is even if you're providing through a online platform, you don't have to pay GST. E-commerce companies does not have to pay GST. Only the hoteler have to pay GST. That is case where it's a big hotel wherein they're charging tariff. The tariff rate is more than 7,500 per room. Any room, even if one room is more than 7,500, it becomes a specified premises. So on that specified premises, the service provider itself has to pay tax under forward charge. Okay. Then supply of restaurant service is included in the aggregate turnover. Even though मेरे taxes e-commerce company pay करती है, लेकिन this turnover has to be included in the turnover of the restaurant person itself. Okay, the restaurant person itself pays the does not pay the taxes, but this will be included in his aggregate turnover. What is the relevance of aggregate turnover? Very much relevant because based on the aggregate turnover, a lot of other compliance is there. So if your aggregate turnover is more than 5 crore, then GST or 9C. If your aggregate turnover is less than 5 crores, then you have to only pay GST on a monthly basis. Okay, so that's where the relevance of aggregate turnover is there, which decides a lot of things. Okay, so that is on the other part on services through e-commerce. Next is restaurant services provided through e-commerce not to be considered as inward supplies. Okay, since e-commerce companies pay the taxes on behalf of these restaurant services cannot say that you pay us also some money. They can't ask that. So restaurant services provided to e-commerce companies not to be considered as an inward supply. So this is not an inward supply for the e-commerce company. It's just कि दूसरे का सरदर्द मेरे ऊपर डाल दिया. the monkey which was there on the e-commerce company that is jumped to me. So instead of the restaurant service restaurant provider paying the GST, the burden is shifted to the e-commerce company. E-commerce company has to pay the taxes under reverse charge. Then reversal of proportionate ITC on input goods and services not required by e-commerce company. जब हम input tax credit claim करेंगे, that time I will say that they have to reverse ITC on exempt supply. So your e-commerce company is only paying taxes, but they are not providing any service. Still, that will not be considered for reversal of input tax credit. Then GST is to be paid by the supplier on services not mentioned under 9(5) of the CGST Act, but shipped through e-commerce company. Okay, GST to be paid by the supplier of services which is not notified but supplied through an e-commerce company. Then that is in case of services which are not notified. If it is not notified, then supplier only has to pay. If it is notified, we have seen that 5 category of services are notified under e-commerce, then those people have to, the e-commerce company will have to pay. An e-commerce company will have to raise invoice in respect of restaurant service supplied through e-commerce. So this e-commerce company will raise invoice on behalf of the hotelier. Hotelier may not raise the invoice, that is fine. Then billing in case of restaurant services and goods or services other than restaurant service being sold by a restaurant to a customer under the same order. So अगर billing करता है restaurant services and it provides any other services along with restaurant services, जैसे cab service provide कर दिया, then restaurant to a customer under the same order, then separately mention करके separate उसका taxes लेके he has to consider. How Amazon or Flipkart work? Amazon, Flipkart is not under these categories. So the supplier, जैसे कपड़े किसी ने सेल कर दिए e-commerce पे, toothbrush सेल कर दिया, that is not coming under reverse charge. So then this supplier of garments or this toothpaste person itself has to pay the GST on his supply. Who will get ITC in case of e-commerce company? Nobody gets ITC in case of e-commerce company, because in case of a e-commerce company, if it is a restaurant services, so if it's a restaurant service, then they supply food, and food is a, so various categories of e-commerce are there. Let me tell you which all categories of e-commerce we are talking about. Yeah, we're seeing multiple services wherein transportation of cab, in case of motor cabs, motorcycles, ITC is not there. If they're providing any accommodation in hotels, and this e-commerce company, just a hotel accommodation is provided by Make My Trip. Make My Trip will pay taxes on behalf of the hotelier. Credit will be available to the service recipient. So ITC can be claimed by the service recipient itself. In case of housekeeping services, if you used it for your business purposes, booked it through uh, Urban Clap, then Urban Clap will charge the GST. The company who's employing the services of the Urban Clap, they will claim the credit. In case of restaurant services, credit will not be a question, because on restaurant services, food services, you cannot claim the credit. So in case of restaurant services, we said who is a supplier? Any person except services supplied by a restaurant eating joint located at specified premises. What's a specified premises? Means any premises providing accommodation services having declaration more than 7,500 rupees. What does TCS means? TCS means tax collected at source. So if you are making any transaction through an e-commerce, the government wants to know who is the supplier. So they will not just take a list from the e-commerce company. They will tell that, okay, e-commerce company, आप supply कर रहे हो बहुत सारे लोगों का, so you deduct TDS, like how TDS is deducted under income tax. Similarly, there is something called as tax collected at source, which is called as short form TCS. This TCS has to be paid by this e-commerce company, say 1%, and they will have to report कि मैंने 1% credit किया for this supplier. So government will have then the source की हाँ हाँ इतने लोग ई कॉमर्स कंपनी के थ्रू बिजनेस कर रहे हैं, whether they are paying taxes or no, I can track them. That is what they will do. So TCS means tax collector at source. I've explained that. Okay. Now restaurant services, we understood all the points on restaurant services. Now let us proceed further on classification of goods. Okay. So we have discussed on reverse charge mechanism completely. Now we'll discuss on classification of goods. Okay. So classification of goods, if you see in your material, you will have a theoretical aspect. My objective, as usual, is to give you a practical flavor. So what does classification of goods and services says is that what is the goods, how do you give the GST rate for the goods? They will mention a number which is called a harmonized system of nomenclature, which is also called as HSN. So हर एक goods का एक HSN number रहेगा. So you recognize your GST rate based on this HSN. Now there becomes a issue on how do you classify the HSNs, because two goods are very similar. There could be difference in HSN. So that's why for GST purposes, we are using the HSN system, which is guided under the customs, because customs we've been using HSN since beginning. Since they have been using from beginning, they have some interpretations on what are the various ways to interpret. So whatever is that interpretation, that itself we will use for GST. So for that, we will go to the customs tariff and see that how do we use the customs tariff there. So you are seeing a page of customs tariff book which says that on a particular chapter, this is the bifurcation of the chapter and this is how you have to write. So customs has each chapter wise section, first is section wise, then chapter wise bifurcation. Each chapter के अंदर आपको specific goods मिलेंगे. Now this chapter 4 is one example which says this is for dairy produce, birds, eggs, natural honey, edible products, and which is not elsewhere specified. So this is the main heading. This has chapter notes saying that what is the meaning of specific things. Here they have defined what does the expression milk means. Milk means full cream milk or partially or completely skimmed milk. So that is the meaning of the term which will be taxable below. So chapter notes, this is the chapter notes which gives you the details of the important terms. Then subheading notes also will be there saying that what is the subheading notes. Then we come to the tariff. So this is the tariff which says that it starts with the 4-digit code. So since it is chapter 4, it will start with 04 and 01 will be the first item, 02 will be the second item. So 0401 is the first tariff item. This is the main description. This is only to show you where you have to go. Once you go there, then you have 8-digit HSN code. 04011000 is the first HSN code. On this product, the unit of measurement is kgs and the rate of duty under customs is 30%. So similarly, you will have various tariffs, first 4-digit codes, then 6-digit, and then 8-digit, or it could be 4 to 8 directly. In this case, it is directly 4 to 8. In second case, it is 4, then 6, then 8. So ultimately, it's a 8-digit HSN code under the customs. So you start with section heading, chapter heading, then the chapter notes, then chapter clarification through subnotes. Then we have the tariff itself. It says that what is the tariff. So if you have to find out classification, you have to go to the tariff and find out the customs classification. Similar to this, we have under GST also, that GST का भी आपको बता देता हूं मैं. Yeah, this is the GST rate schedule, which says notification number 1 of 2017, and these are the various rates which are applicable. So they'll have a schedule. Schedule 1, 2.5%. These are the heading tariff item numbers. These item numbers, for reference, you can see the customs tariff, but what are the description of the goods will be mentioned here. Okay, so this is what is called as classification under GST. Based on the classification on customs, those rules will apply here for classification, saying what is the chapter heading. This is the chapter heading, chapter notes, description of goods. Based on this, you will levy tax. So if it is under Schedule 1, it is under 2.5 plus 2.5, matlab 5%. Then if it is falling under Schedule 2, then it is 6 plus 6, 12%. If it is under Schedule 3, then 9 plus 9, 18%. Like that, they have different schedules. You have to see which of your goods fall under which schedule. If it falls under first schedule, you will levy tax at 5%. If it falls under second schedule, then you levy at 12%, so on and so forth. Okay. So this is on the customs classification and classification under GST. Now GST rate classification for services. How does the GST rate classification for services work? Again, on services also, we have a similar notification, notification number 11 of 2017. Is it necessary to remember? Yes. Service rate is very necessary to remember. So we have to mention the notification number. Reverse charge was under notification number 13/2017. GST on forward charge of services is under 11 of 2017. This again has chapter, section, and headings. Charge starts with chapter 99 because from 1 to 98 are covered for goods, and for services it starts from chapter 99. 99, then it has section number. What is the section description, which is called construction services? Then the heading, which is 9954. So by 99, then 9954. Okay. This is for construction services. The rate is 9%. So 9% CGST, 9% SGST. Like that, we have a description for services. It says that what is the classification for services. Now, what are the services rates we have? We have 6 rates, 0.75%, 2.5%, 3.75%, 6%, 9%, 14%. So there are multiple rates. This is only there under CGST, so it will be double. Like for GT and restaurant services, if it is mentioned 2.5%, the actual rate what will they charge is 2.5% CGST, 2.5% SGST, so 5%. And for say specified goods, specified services like gambling, admission to entertainment events, services by race clubs, it will be chargeable at highest rate, which is 14 plus 14, 28%. And services not specified anywhere will be a rate at 18%. So the general rate for GST on services is at 18%. For services, we use SEC code. Yes, we use SEC code. So for hotel services through e-commerce and pay GST paid by e-commerce, how ITC available to hotel? होटल को लिए ITC available नहीं है. होटल में कौन जाके रह रहा है, who's staying in hotel, that person will claim the credit. Hotel will charge GST, so they do not get any ITC on that. Okay. Next is on housing projects. So very simple chapter on housing project. It says that what should be the tax on housing projects. It just says that पहले बहुत सारा कंफ्यूजन था. So from with effect from 1st April 2019, the housing projects are divided into two categories. First is if it's a affordable housing or a non-affordable housing. So if it's a small house, it will be called as a affordable housing house. So if it's a house which has some less square feet, that is, it has less than 60 square feet area, and it is having a value less than 45 lakhs, then it's a affordable housing. Then you will charge GST at the rate of 1% itself. Okay? And if it's a bigger house, that is other than a non affordable housing, all other projects will be called as regular houses. New projects other than affordable projects will be chargeable at 5%. Projects with commercial space less than 15% of the total carpet area, that is also called as non-affordable housing. All of this residential houses are charged at that 1% or 5%. So on housing projects, there are two GST rate. One is at 1% and one is at 5%. So 1% is on affordable housing projects, and on the non-affordable housing projects, the rate is 5%. But there are conditions common to both of it. What are those conditions? Say first is ITC is denied. Since your rate from 12%, 18%, I'm bringing down directly to 1% and 5%. Now don't ask me any input tax credit. So all your input tax credit is deemed to be claimed. So your ITC is denied, first of all your ITC goes waste. Second is the condition, very important condition is 80% of your inputs. 80% of your inputs should be procured from registered person. ऐसा नहीं है कि आपको ITC नहीं मिलेगा, so you can purchase from any unregistered person. No, you have a limit there saying that up to 80% of your procurements should be from a registered person. If you do not procure 80% from your registered person, you're crossing that limit. Then, if not, tax under 18% will be paid under reverse charge mechanism. Okay, so if you are purchasing from a registered person, I don't have any problem क्योंकि registered person will charge GST, तो GST गवर्नमेंट को चला गया है, और ये अफोर्डेबल हाउसिंग या हाउसिंग प्रोजेक्ट वाले उसका क्रेडिट नहीं लेंगे, that's fine. But you should, since you purchased it from a registered person, he will pay taxes to me. But when you purchase from an unregistered person, I will not get the taxes. That's why you have to pay taxes under reverse charge, because I've given you full credit and you have procured less than 80%. Because मैंने आपको कह दिया कि 20% आप unregistered से purchase करो, no problem. So I gave you limit of 80%, but you have fallen short. Say only 70% you have purchased from registered person, 30% purchase किया unregistered person से. तो लिमिट क्या था 80%, तो 70% रजिस्ट्रेशन परचेज से क्लेम कर लिया, तो बैलेंस 20% जो है उसके ऊपर आपको रिवर्स चार्ज पे करना पड़ेगा. So the builder will have to pay GST under RCM at 18%. If it's not a builder and if it's a cement purchased, then the GST under RCM is 28%. Okay, so this RCM which we say that you have to pay under reverse charge, this is an example of reverse charge under 9(4), which says that when you purchase from an unregistered person, you have to pay GST. That is this service. So when a builder procures any goods from an unregistered person, he has to pay taxes under reverse charge on cement 28%, other than cement on all products at 18%. Okay, clear till now? In hotels, customers pays GST. Yes, customers only will pay. Payment, we are all talking on collection. Okay. If we make hotel booking through online mode, अगर आप होटल डायरेक्टली जाके बुक करते हो देन यू हैव टू पे जीएसटी बिकॉज होटलर इज प्रोवाइडिंग साइटली सर्विस टू यू. But if an e-commerce comes in between and you're booking it through e-commerce, then GST will be paid by e-commerce. But if it's a normal walk-in, then GST will be paid by the hotelier directly. सर हाउसिंग प्रोजेक्ट्स को हिंदी में एक्सप्लेन प्लीज. ओके. हाउसिंग प्रोजेक्ट्स इज अ सिंपल प्रोपोजिशन जो बताता है कि आपको 1/4/2019 के बाद जो आप हाउसिंग प्रोजेक्ट बनाओगे, मतलब जो बिल्डर हाउसिंग बनाएगा, बिल्डर बनाता है ना बड़ा सारा काफी फ्लोर्स बनाते हैं और उसको बेचते हैं. जब ये बिल्डर बिल्डिंग बना के बेचते हैं तो क्या जीएसटी लगना चाहिए. इसके लिए क्लैरिटी आ गया है कि बोलते हैं सिर्फ दो रेट लगेगा. अगर आपका छोटा घर है, ठीक है, इफ इट इज लेस देन 60 स्क्वायर फीट और वैल्यू उसका कम है 45 लाख के नीचे है, तो आपको जीएसटी 1% पे करना पड़ेगा. और अगर ये रेगुलर हाउस है कि ये लिमिट से बाहर जो आता है, तो उसके लिए आपको 5% जीएसटी पे करना पड़ेगा. ठीक है. ये है 1% और 5% लैंड वैल्यू कम करके. वैसे रेट 7.5% था. 7.5% में आपको 33% लैंड के लिए डिडक्शन मिलता है, क्योंकि लैंड के ऊपर आपको जीएसटी नहीं पे करना पड़ता है. तो अगर अफोर्डेबल हाउसिंग है तो 0.75 एक रेट बताया था, 0.75 इंटू टू करेंगे तो 1.5% रहेगा. उसका 33% जो 1/3 वैल्यू है वो लैंड के लिए कम कर दिया जाएगा. तो 1.5% में मैं 0.5% लैंड का हटा देता हूँ तो बचता है 1%. दैट इज दिस 1%. और 7.5% में 1/3 हटा देता हूँ तो 7.5 माइनस 2.5 मेक्स इट एज 5%. तो ये है दो रेट जो हाउसिंग प्रोजेक्ट के लिए चलेगा. लेकिन गवर्नमेंट बोलती है आप बिल्डर हो, आप कम जीएसटी पे कीजिए, लेकिन मेरे थोड़े कंडीशन है. क्या कंडीशन है भाई साहब. गवर्नमेंट बताती है कि मैं आपका रेट कम कर रहा हूं, आप मुझसे आईटीसी मत मांगिएगा. तो आपको आईटीसी का क्लेम नहीं मिलेगा. ठीक है, पहला कंडीशन. सेकेंड कंडीशन, ठीक है, जब मेरे को आईटीसी नहीं मिल रहा है तो मैं अनरजिस्टर्ड परचेज से परचेज करूं, ताकि वो सामने वाला जीएसटी चार्ज नहीं करे और मुझे जीएसटी का तो वैसे क्रेडिट नहीं मिलेगा, वो खर्चा कम हो जाए. गवर्नमेंट ने कहा नहीं, आप ऐसे करोगे तो रजिस्टर्ड वाले लोग कहाँ जाएंगे. आपको मिनिमम तो रजिस्टर्ड पर्सन से परचेज करना पड़ेगा. कितना परचेज करना पड़ेगा. 80% ऑफ इनपुट्स में रजिस्टर्ड पर्सन से खरीदूंगा. तो हाउसिंग वाले फर्स्ट आईटीसी क्लेम नहीं कर सकते. सेकेंड कंडीशन है कि उनको 80% जो उनके परचेजेस है, आउट ऑफ टोटल परचेजेस 80% ऑफ द इनपुट शुड बी फ्रॉम रजिस्टर्ड पर्सन. 80% आपको रजिस्टर्ड बंदों से खरीदना पड़ेगा. जो शॉर्टफॉल होगा, 80 से नीचे अगर कुछ शॉर्टफॉल ऐसे 70% परचेज किया और 10% का शॉर्टेज है, जो आप 10% का शॉर्टेज है कि आपने सीमेंट परचेज कर लिया अनरजिस्टर्ड पर्सन से, तो सीमेंट के ऊपर रेट 28% का है, आपको 28% देना पड़ेगा. अगर सीमेंट नहीं है, शॉर्ट अनरजिस्टर्ड से आपने नहीं खरीदिया, लेकिन कुछ और चीजें आपने अनरजिस्टर्ड परचेज से की है, तो उसके ऊपर आपको 18% रेट लगेगा. फिर आपको रेट क्लासिफिकेशन क्या खरीदा, उसके ऊपर क्या रेट है, ये ढूंढने की जरूरत नहीं है. सीमेंट है, आपने अनरजिस्टर्ड पर्सन से खरीदा है, 28% पे कीजिए. आपने अगर कुछ और चीज खरीदा है अनरजिस्टर्ड पर्सन से, अगर भी 5% भी है, फिर भी आपको रिवर्स चार्ज में 18% पे करना पड़ेगा. होप हिंदी में आपको समझ में आ गया होगा. How the authorities know about 80%? So there is a return. So when you file your return, a builder has to make an annual declaration of these returns, saying that what is the value of his purchases and how much of it is purchased from registered person. Through that return, the government will come to know. सर अगर रजिस्टर्ड पर्सन से 900% बाई कर लिया है तो कितना पे करना पड़ा जीएसटी. अगर 100% पे कर दिया तो आपको रिवर्स चार्ज में 1 रुपए पे करने की जरूरत नहीं है. आपको सिर्फ फॉरवर्ड चार्ज में जो आप कस्टमर खरीदेंगे आपके प्रोजेक्ट्स, तो फिर वो उनसे आपको 1% और 5% खरीद के गवर्नमेंट को देना। आपको रिवर्स चार्ज में कुछ भी पे करने की जरूरत नहीं। सीमेंट का टैक्स एग्रीगेट कर लाएगा या फिर 10। रामजा, आपका क्वेश्चन समझ में नहीं आया, फिर से क्लियरली पूछिए। Yes, Preeti Ketan, I am from Karnataka. So you were not present yesterday. I had given a brief introduction that I am a chartered accountant and company secretary practicing in Bangalore in Karnataka. So this means that if a person buying home for 10 lakhs, then 8 lakhs must be from registered person, not the home buyer. It is not on the person who's buying the home. It's the developer. Developer, yeah, the exact word यहाँ पे जो लिखा है, if it's a housing project, so the person, the builder who is building the house, he should buy this goods because एक हाउस वाले के ऊपर टैक्स नहीं है, तो बिल्डर के ऊपर टैक्स लायबिलिटी है। सो जब बिल्डर बेचेगा तो बिल्डर टैक्स लगाएगा, राइट? So if the builder purchases from unregistered person, then he has to pay under reverse charge. Sir, ITC of both not available to builder, housing of sale and purchase of material. Yes, both ITC is not available to him. Cement tax is leviable on aggregate amount or which is less than limit on condition, which is less than the limit of condition. On the differential, it is not available. But cement, if cement is purchased, cement के ऊपर exception है that 80% input जो condition है that is on the total unregistered person. But cement, if you purchase on the extent of 80% or to the extent of total also, if you are purchasing any cement from unregistered person, then it is 28%. Your question is absolutely clear, Ramja, that if I purchase cement to the extent of 20%, is it okay? No. Cement should always be purchased from a registered person itself. If you're buying from an unregistered person, then you have to always pay at 28%. Good question. Schedule 3 covers sale of land and building. 9.4 you are paying in RCM. Is there a particular difference? Yes. Schedule 3 says land and constructed building. But we are talking of the stage where the building is still in construction stage. If it is still under construction stage, how do you distinguish between whether it's constructed or not fully constructed? There is an important document called as occupancy certificate. So if this occupancy certificate is received, then it is considered as a Schedule 3, which is covered under land and buildings. And then it will be not liable to GST. But any sale happening before getting this occupancy certificate, that is liable to GST. Clear, Nagraju? Sir, RCM is like IGST having only one rate? No. RCM is having multiple rates. So if that particular service or particular goods is liable to 5%, so reverse charge also you'll pay 5%. GTA 5%, right? GTA is under reverse charge, but still 5%. Restaurant services, e-commerce 5%. Other lawyer services 18%. So GTA does not have one specific rate. What is the general rate on that goods or services? That itself will be the rate for reverse charge. Is there any threshold limit for RCM? It should be paid on every single transaction, on every single transaction. What is the meaning of affordable here? There is a limit, right? I will get back to you. Affordable housing means a limit which is the square feet is less than 60 meters and the value of the house is less than 45 lakhs. If a cement is purchased 30% from registered person, then tax is leviable on 10% of it, right? No, nothing. Because if you're buying purchase cement from entirely from a registered person, then you don't have to pay any tax on reverse charge. 1% and 5% is differentiated. Yes, affordable 1% and non-affordable 5%. Affordable small houses 1%, non-small houses 5%. Any questions on reverse charge generally? Rest of 20% GST will be paid on RCM. Not rest of 20%, up to 80% if it is there, fine. So 20% if you purchase from unregistered person, it's fine. No taxes on reverse charge. Seeing that out of your 100%, there may be some unregistered person because they buy sand, jelly, and those things, right? And those they have to purchase from an unregistered person itself. So they are giving give a leeway कि आपको एक छूट दी गई है up to 20% you purchase from unregistered person, that's fine. If ITC is claimed, then builder has to pay GST at the rate of 50%. No, that option is not there. A builder cannot claim the ITC because on housing projects, they cannot claim any ITC. So that option itself is not available. So if it is a commercial project, then they can pay 18% and claim the ITC. But if it's a housing project, the builder has to pay 1 or 5%. Okay. So we'll take a break of 10 minutes, 5 to 6 minutes here and come back before 9:26 or 7:26. And we'll proceed further to discuss the important concept called as composite supply. So we have completed RCM, we have completed e-commerce. Now let's move to, after the break, let's move to composition supply. and the value should be less than 45 lakhs. 45 lakhs limit for both metros and non-metros. So it should be below 45 lakhs. Is there any limit for small and large houses? This is the limit. Who keeps the amount of tax collected from RCM charge from affordable housing? So, if it is affordable housing, the tax under RCM, nobody keeps it. That is paid to the government. And credit will not be available because credit is restricted. So for affordable housing or non-affordable housing, on the shortfall to the extent of 80% what they have not purchased, to that extent they will have to pay extra GST. So apart from collecting 1% from the customers, on this shortfall they have to pay GST to the government. Leo, your question is if the assessee is a sale of land to the customer, he didn't charge any GST to the customer. So, can he claim ITC for land development? No, he cannot claim because if there is no outward supply itself on which GST is payable, then input tax credit is not claimable and it is not available. Nagraju, on your question of statutory updates, we'll come back to that. But since you're specifically asked, there is a clarification which says that if a director provides immovable property, then it is not subject to RCM. Because on director providing immovable property service, if it's a rental services, then it will not be liable to RCM. And the director himself will have to pay the GST. That is first point. Second is under 9(5), omnibus is excluded. So earlier, until now, omnibus was there, but through this amendment, omnibus was excluded. We have to know the provision and then the amendments. So that's why we were discussing the provision. Once we comes to statutory update, we'll discuss that. But good that you have asked that. And services supplied by central government or state government, excluding service by Ministry of Railway, is again excluded. Now we'll discuss a important concept called as composition supply. Okay, so the government said that okay, GST is there. Now some small suppliers or small businessmen came and said that we can't get into the full scheme of GST. This claiming of input tax credit, following up with the customers, we can't do it. Following up with the suppliers, we can't do it. So give us a alternative scheme. So that's where they came up with this composition scheme. What does this composition scheme say is that if you're a small trader or a small manufacturer, then you have a special rate for you. We will give you a special rate, which is lower than the rate what we normally charge to other customers or charge for other registered people. But when we give you this benefit under composition, don't ever come to us and again ask the input tax credit. So composition people said that, okay, we will not ask for any input tax credit, give us the benefit. So they gave a benefit. So they said, come on, composition dealers, if your turnover is below a certain limit, that limit is generally 1.5 crores, we will give you a special scheme. This is called as composition scheme for goods. So there are two schemes. One is composition scheme for goods. Another one is composition scheme for services. So if you are under composition scheme for goods, that is covered under section 10. So composition scheme completely covered under 10, but 10(1) and 10(2) specifically covers for goods and 10(2)(a) covers for services. Okay, now let's discuss on the goods. Saying that, okay, I'll give you a special rate. What rate will you give me? If you are a manufacturer, then you have to pay 1%. Okay. If you're a trader, you have to pay 1%. Okay. Only goods, no? But there was an exception because services came very late. That time, composition scheme was only for goods. But in that one exception, they gave saying that one service provider also will give composition. Who is that service provider? The service of restaurant services who are doing in the food business. For them also, they gave a composition scheme saying at under 10.1 and 10.2 itself that we will give you a composition, but you will not get that 1% for manufacturer or trader because manufacturer and trader 1% we can afford. But if you are a restaurant service provider, then you have to pay 5%. Okay. So they said for a manufacturer 1%, trader 1%, and restaurant service provider 5%. And then they that was the composition which was running. Now they said 1%. There are two 1%, but there is a difference between 1% what we charge to a manufacturer and 1% what we charge to a trader. 1% to a manufacturer is on the turnover in the state. Okay, whatever is his turnover in the state on that 1%. But for trader, they said 1% of the turnover of taxable supplies of goods or services. They made a distinction between what 1%, what is the base on which 1% will be charged for a manufacturer, and what is the base of 1% for a trader. For a trader, they said 1% on taxable supplies. On manufacturer, they didn't say taxable supplies, they said on total turnover. So if a manufacturer produces any exempted goods, on that also he has to pay 1% because he's under composition. But a trader, if he's trading in exempted goods, he does not have to pay on that. He has to pay only on the taxable supplies. So that's the distinction. Even though the manufacturer and trader is 1%, the government said for manufacturer, you have to have 1% on the whole turnover. And for a trader, they said 1% on only taxable supplies. And restaurant service, 5%. So then there were other services, let's say like small service providers of saloons or any kind of small services providers who said that we also want a composition. Then they brought in a section called 10.2A. And they said, okay, आप भी आ जाओ, आपको भी composition देंगे. You can have the benefit of 6%. 3% CGST, 3% SGST. You have to pay 6% on your services. So ऐसे होता है composition की जो बड़े बिजनेस में नहीं है, छोटे बिजनेस में उनके लिए कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम लाया गया है और उनको कहा गया कि आप कम टैक्स पे कीजिए, लेकिन आप इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट मत पूछिएगा, आपको इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट का बेनिफिट नहीं मिलेगा. तो ठीक है कह दिया. ट्रेडर को 1% किसके ऊपर लगेगा? जो उनके टैक्सेबल सेल्स है. मैन्युफैक्चरर को 1% रहेगा टोटल टर्नओवर पे और रेस्टोरेंट सर्विसेज को मिलेगा 5%. रेस्टोरेंट सर्विसेज 5% कलेक्ट करेंगे, 5% गवर्नमेंट को डिपॉजिट करेंगे. और जो दूसरे सर्विसेज है अपार्ट फ्रॉम रेस्टोरेंट, दूसरा कोई भी सर्विस प्रोवाइडर है उसको 6% का कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम है. तो दिस इज द कॉम्पोजिशन स्कीम. नाउ what is the nitty gritties of this composition scheme? This is not a compulsory scheme. आपका turnover less than 1.5 crore है, आपको composition में जाना पड़ेगा, ये compulsory नहीं है. Because this is an optional scheme. If I want to pay higher taxes and claim the credit, I can still do it. Reverse charge में there is no such option. If it is under category of reverse charge, we have discussed, they have to compulsorily pay under reverse charge. But composition is not a compulsion, it's a option. So if you want to opt it, आपको कोई जोर जबरदस्ती नहीं है. Then what are the benefits? The benefits is you don't have to pay the taxes on a monthly basis. Okay, you can pay the taxes on a quarterly basis और return आपको सालाना एक ही करना पड़ेगा. You can pay quarterly payment at specified rates without claiming ITC and file one annual return. And there is no need of classification कि मेरा goods 5% है, 12% है, 18% है, 24% है. If you are registered under composition, you have to pay just 1% for your trader or manufacturer. But if you're a restaurant service provider, 5%, and if you're any other service provider, 6%. Now, what is the limit? Limit says that you have a threshold limit, wherein if your aggregate turnover calculated on all India basis which is PAN based, up to 1.5 crores in the previous financial year. Your turnover in the previous year should be up to 1.5 crores. You should be small previous year, and even in the current year, if it is less than 1.5 crore, then you will be under composition. Now, this 1.5 crore, there's an exception for special category states. Okay, 1.5 crores is for all states, but for 8 special category states, it is 75 lakhs. आधा सीधा 1.45 crores का आधा मिलेगा. saying that अगर कोई प्रोवाइडर 80 lakhs का है और वो स्पेशल कैटेगरी स्टेट्स में है तो उसको कॉम्पोजिशन का स्कीम का बेनिफिट नहीं मिलेगा. ठीक है, बिकॉज they don't want to give much benefit because they don't have much revenue. So those are which are those 8 special category states. I have called it as TNMM SUMA. SUMA. T starts for Tripura, N starts for Nagaland, M stands for Mizoram, and another M stands for Manipur. So these TNMM states and SUMA, Sikkim, Uttarakhand, Meghalaya, and Arunachal Pradesh. Okay, I repeat it. TNMM stands for Tripura, Nagaland, Mizoram, and Manipur. And SUMA stands for S stands for Sikkim, U stands for Uttarakhand, M stands for Meghalaya, and A stands for Arunachal Pradesh. So in 8 special category states, the limit is 75 lakhs. That is for goods. For services, either special category states or normal category states, for all the states, it is at the limit is 50 lakhs. So 10(2)A जो हमने बताया था, उसका limit है 50 lakhs. 10(1) and 10(2), the limit is 1.5 crores generally. So this is the composition scheme. Now, before I take up your questions, I want to explain what is aggregate turnover and turnover in a state. Aggregate turnover is for calculating the threshold limit of that 1.5 crores. यहाँ पे हमने बताया था ना 1.5 crores. This is the aggregate turnover. So for this aggregate turnover, what all you will include? Taxable supplies, exempt supplies, exports also. So any exports you have made, that is also aggregate supply, and any interstate supply. So all of these supplies in the previous year, if it crosses 1.5 crores, you cannot opt for composition. So I'll say, no, my taxable supplies is below 1.5 crores, but I have made exports of 2 crores. Exclude me. Why export not taxable? Yes, export is 0 rated, but still you will not get this aggregate turnover benefit. Taxable supplies, exempt supplies, export of goods, and interstate supplies all put together, if it's crossing 1.5 crores, you are out of composition. Then you should not include the value of RCM, even though RCM is paid by the service receiver, and I am service receiver of some services. I am paying in the capacity of a service receiver, that is not to be included. Then taxes, including cess paid. So all the taxes you don't have to add. Only the value is what you have to consider for this aggregate turnover limit. Explanation to section 10 says includes value of supply from 1st April of the financial year up to date of becoming liable for registration. So your turnover starts from the 1st of April for calculating this aggregate turnover. And there is another exclusion, which is the value of interest on discounts or deposits, because interest is also a type of supply, but on interest, there is no GST. So any interest income received, that is not to be included for the purpose of aggregate turnover. Okay, so this is the definition of aggregate turnover, which we have to consider. Then we said for a trader, what all we have to consider. Turnover in a state will include taxable supplies and exempt supplies for a manufacturer, but for a trader, exempt supplies we will not include. Exports तो दोनों के लिए include नहीं होगा, and interstate supplies तो possibly ही नहीं है. So for a composition dealer, taxable supplies and exempt supplies has to be added for a manufacturer. For a trader, only taxable supplies. What does it exclude? Again, same inward supplies which we pay under RCM, उसके ऊपर again tax नहीं लगेगा, and tax is not a part of your turnover. And it also excludes the interest or deposits and those things. Okay. What is composition scheme? It's a special scheme given wherein you pay less taxes. So startup companies comes under composite. All companies comes under composite if their turnover is below the limits. No specification or no distinction for anybody. Then manufacturers send to goods to trader. Each of both pay 1%, tax pay nahi. So manufacturer once he sells, he pays 1%. Now trader को उसका credit नहीं मिलेगा. Now the trader when he sells, then he will pay 1%. So these 1%, 5%, 6% are to pay to the government, or do they also collect at this rate? They has to be paid to the government, and this taxes they cannot collect from the customer. So whatever taxes is there, they have to pay it from their own pocket. They cannot collect it from the customer. So composition scheme may trader pay GST on taxable turnover? Yes, 1%, but trader also purchase from other registered or unregistered person and they charge GST on these rates. Yes. So when they purchase from registered or unregistered person, they will charge GST. That is a input tax credit, which input tax credit under composition they cannot claim. The composition scheme itself says that when you pay taxes at lower rate, anybody is charging you any other rate, say you're buying from another composition person itself, still you cannot claim credit of anything. Sir, is composition taxpayer can collect GST from customer? No, you cannot collect. Turnover is for 1 month aggregate or whole year, aggregate turnover for the whole year. Sir, if I would have registered in special category state 75 lakhs, even normal state 1.5 lakh, then limit will be 75 lakhs. Correct. So that will come with an example, but what you're saying is correct. Why any business come to pay tax by their own when they are not authority to collect the customer? So some places where the prices is fixed, say for small slippers, any person who is dealing in sale of slippers, he cannot charge a price on the slippers plus GST, right? He will charge only for the slippers itself and he has to pay the tax on his own because the prices are decided with taxes, the 300, 400. On that, he cannot charge GST. So for such small traders, such small manufacturers where he cannot collect amount from the customer, or he does not want to collect because if he collects, then he will collect on the slipper rate of 12%, higher rate, his prices will go up. Then he has to have that janjat of keeping all the records for his input tax credit. That's why he does not want this trouble, so he will go for composition. Composition come under the liability of RCM? Yes, composition will still come under the liability of RCM. Even though he is paying taxes at 1%, on his RCM, he will have to pay under the respective RCM rate. We'll move further on what are the conditions he has to satisfy. Registered person who is not eligible. So we have seen that who is eligible and who will pay RCM, but there are certain conditions which says that person who is not eligible, any person who is making any supply of goods which are not leviable to tax. अगर आप exempted products में deal करते हो, then you cannot come under composition. You have to be a person who is dealing only with taxable goods. If you're dealing taxable and exempted together, still fine. But if you're dealing only in exempted goods, then why will you take a registration? You will not take. So person making any supply which are not leviable to tax outside the composition scheme. Any second important conditions, persons making any interstate outward supplies. अगर आप from one state to another state supply करते हो, you are out of composition. Interstate supply you cannot do, you are out of composition. Person supplying goods or services through an e-commerce operator, out. अगर आप interstate करते हो, you are out. If you're making supply through an e-commerce operator, you're out. Then specific products, if you manufacture, also you're out. This is manufacturer of ice cream, pan masala, tobacco, aerated water, fly ash bricks, or fly ash blocks, bricks of fossil meals, building bricks, earthen or roofing tiles. These category of people are outside GST. If anybody who's manufacturing this, you cannot claim composition scheme. Further, a casual taxable person or non-resident taxable person cannot come under this. A casual taxable person is who is registered in my state, say Karnataka, he wants to go to Tamil Nadu and hold a exhibition for temporary purpose. He will have to apply for a casual registration. So that person is a casual taxable person. So a casual taxable person cannot get registration on a composition. Then a person who is registered under composition, he has to pay GST under 93 or 94. Mostly under 93 aega because 94 is on builders. Builder will not come under composition. So he has to pay tax under 93 on all his inward supplies. Then supplier of services subject to marginal supply of service. So he cannot make any supply of services. If he is a supply of manufacturer or is a trader, then he should be doing only that. Supply of services is not allowed, but some marginal supply is there, which we will discuss, saying that chota mota service kar sakte ho, not major ones. So those are the restrictions for composition scheme for goods. Now there are restrictions for composition scheme for services. Again, same thing, person making any supply of goods which are not leviable to tax cannot come this. Then any person who is making interstate outward supplies out. Person supplying goods through TCS again out. And supply of notified service. Government will notify, like how in goods they gave some manufacturer of ice creams, fly ash things. For this also they can come up with a notification. Till now they have not come up, but they can come up with some notification. Again, a casual taxable person or a non-resident person cannot come under this composition. Then he has to pay tax under 93 or 94. Okay. Next aspect to consider that we said that small amount he can pay through, he can deal in services. What is that small amount? That small amount is services which value not exceeding 10% of the turnover in a state or union territory in the preceding financial year or rupees 5 lakhs, whichever is higher. To this extent, he can deal in transaction of services, which means what? It means that a trader or manufacturer who is making any supply of goods and if he's dealing in services was out, but the government says that if to marginal extent we'll give you a benefit, saying that marginally you can do a supply of services. How much is that margin? Saying that 10% of your preceding financial year's turnover up to that extent or 5 lakhs, whichever is higher. To that extent, you can make supply of services. Okay. In the above calculation, interest on loans, deposits, and advances will not be taken into consideration. Like how interest is exempted for the purpose of this calculation also, this is to be excluded. Understood till now? What rate of RCM is payable? Normal rate of RCM is available. So if it is a GTA, he will have to pay 5%. If it's a lawyer, he has to pay 18%. The regular rate itself, he will pay. Sir, for a composition dealer, the B2B purchases, it includes the ITC. How we show in the books of accounts, it is to accumulate? No, you cannot accumulate. That is your cost. So if your purchase is 100 rupees and supplier has charged GST of 12 rupees, full 112 is your purchase value. Limit beyond which we have to register, we will read it, but the limit for now you understand. For goods, it is separate. For services, it is separate. If you're dealing in goods, the limit is 40 lakhs normally, and for services, 20 lakhs. Again, we have special category states, wherein for if you're dealing in those special category states, then you have to register even if your limit is 20 lakhs. Can we make taxable and exempt supply both under composition scheme? Yes, you can make it. No problem. Sir, is it not eligible for composition or for GST? Which aspect, Nenshi? On the interest portion, if you are asking, then it will not be taken into account for calculation for this marginal scheme. Also on interest, there is no GST. Marginal supply means this supply. So what is that? Margin is small amount of supply which they can do. So they should predominantly be dealing in goods. So marginal extent, to this extent, they can deal in services. Since interstate is exempt, interstate is not exempt, Preeti. Interstate is exempt, then can state make law on composition levy separately? No, each state cannot make. This will be a levy which is there under the CGST law and the SGST law. Each state cannot make a separate scheme for composition. Why we say composition as RCM? Composition is not RCM. Composition is a separate scheme, not under RCM. Supply through e-commerce, sale of goods or services, or only services, both goods and services. In both the slides, it was mentioned that if you're supplying through an e-commerce, you cannot register under a composition scheme. Okay, going further on the composition scheme. In the composition scheme, registered person's invoice, he has to make a disclosure. What disclosure? He has to make a disclosure saying composition dealer. He will not issue a tax invoice also. He will issue some other document called as bill of supply. Because once you say tax invoice, you can collect tax from your customer and the customer can claim the credit on the basis of tax invoice. But composition dealer, as we had discussed, he cannot collect the amount from his customers. He has to pay by his own. So we'll issue a document called as a bill of supply. In the bill of supply, he will mention saying that this is the good which I'm dealing in and this is the value. You have to pay me this much. It'd be similar to invoice, tax invoice, but in a tax invoice, the heading is tax invoice. In a bill of supply, it is bill of supply. In tax invoice, the value and tax is there, but in bill of supply, only value of the goods is there. And in this bill of supply, he should specifically mention that it is a composition taxable person not eligible to collect tax on supplies. This is the important declaration so that the customer also knows that he is buying from a composition dealer and he cannot claim the credit on it. And there is another rule which says that on every notice or signboard which has been displayed, he has to specify that he's a composition taxable person. Okay. So whether it's possible when there will be charged only CGST, not SGST, or SGST, not SGST? No, that's not possible, Abdul. It should be always CGST and SGST together on case of a within the state transaction, and outside the state transaction, which is called as interstate transaction, on that IGST will compulsorily come. Okay. Then intimation for opting for composition. Intimation for opting for composition levy is if it's a new registration, when you apply for new registration, you have to make a disclosure in Part B of REG1. REG1 is a registration application form. In that, in Part B, he has to mention that he wants to opt for composition scheme. The effective date in case of a new registration will be the effective date from which the registration is effective. Okay, the date from which the registration is effective, that will be the date for opting for composition. For existing registration, there is a existing registration. Now you want to go for composition, then we have to file a intimation electronically. Okay, you have to file an intimation electronically and statement of stock within 60 days of financial year. You have to file this declaration saying that I am under normal scheme. Now I want to move to composition scheme. Before the year end, I have to make a declaration or make an application. Then the effective date of composition will be the beginning of the next financial year. What does this mean? आपको साल के बीच में composition scheme apply नहीं कर सकते हो. You cannot opt for composition in between the year. You have to, like, this is the time where you will make an application February में, and till March they will scrutinize. Once they approve, from 1st April, you can be your registration shifts from normal to composition scheme. Can we opt for composition scheme at any point of time and also opt out? No, you cannot opt in any point of time. You have to opt in from the 1st of April itself. And opt out is possible once you cross the limit. अगर आप 75 lakhs क्रॉस कर लेते हो या आपका 1.5 crores क्रॉस कर लेते हो, then you have to opt out of composition because you have crossed the limit. That time you will have to opt out of composition and be a regular person. Can an unregistered person make interstate purchases, sir? Yes, unregistered person can make interstate person, and even a composition dealer, the limit is on making interstate sales. So there is no restriction on making a interstate purchases. He can make it. Casual taxable person means a person who is coming to the state only for a small period. He is called as a casual taxable person. मतलब जो आके temporary purpose के लिए एक exhibition कुछ conduct करता है, then he is a casual taxable person. Okay, 60 days. It is that existing registration when he has to file an intimation electronically that he wants to opt for composition, and within 60 days, because immediately he will not know the stock. So he will get a time of 60 days to intimate to the government saying what was the stock held. Why? Because when he was under composition, he was not claiming credit, but when he goes to the regular scheme, he can claim the credit. That's why the stock is important, that once he informs that this is my stock, then on the extent of stock, he can claim the credit. So it's beneficial for the taxpayer itself to make that declaration. So can we opt for composition scheme at the time of registration? Yes. First one is for new registration itself. You have to mention in part B that you want to register under a composition scheme. Okay. So it looks like few people are getting really unhappy that we are taking a lot of theory, but GST is not a paper of theory, it is practical. When we deal with MCQs, you'll get to know that our concepts has to be get cleared. So once we go to the concepts, you'll understand this is a practical subject, not a theory oriented subject. But to do the practicals, we have to understand the theory. कॉम्पोजिशन से ऑप्ट आउट हो सकते हैं लेकिन ऑप्ट इन नहीं कर सकते. ऑप्ट इन कभी भी नहीं कर सकते. ऑप्ट इन आपको साल के पहले करना पड़ेगा. ऑप्ट आउट आप कभी भी कर सकते. ओके, वैलिडिटी ऑफ कॉम्पोजिशन कब तक वैलिड रहेगा? विड्रॉवल बाय अ टैक्सपेयर हु सीजेस टू सैटिस्फाई एनी प्रिस्क्राइब कंडीशन. जो प्रिस्क्राइब कंडीशन है कॉम्पोजिशन की आप फुलफिल नहीं करते हो, तो फिर you have to file an intimation for withdrawal from the scheme within 7 days of occurrence of the event. मतलब जब आपका टर्नओवर क्रॉस हो गया है या आपके अभी you're not able to satisfy the composition scheme requirement, you want to make any interstate purchase, interstate sales, then within 7 days you have to make an intimation. Pay regular tax for every taxable supply thereafter. Once you are in composition, you pay lower rate. Once you opt out of the composition, you have to pay regular rate. जो अगर गुड्स के ऊपर आप 1% पे करते थे, पर उसी गुड के ऊपर आपको 5% पे करना है, तो आपको 5% पे करना पड़ेगा बिकॉज यू हैव विड्रॉन फ्रॉम द स्कीम. Effective date of withdrawal shall be the date of intimation mentioned, but it has to be present year, cannot be previous year. तो आपको इस साल में ऑप्ट इन करना है तो आपको इस साल में ही फाइल करना पड़ेगा. यू कैन नॉट ऑप्ट आउट नेक्स्ट ईयर. For this year, you cannot opt out next year. And the date of withdrawal shall be the date when you intimate. क्योंकि गवर्नमेंट का अप्रूवल तो बाद में आएगा, but your effective date of withdrawal will be the date when you intimate to the authorities. Then withdrawal by a taxpayer who intends to withdraw from the said scheme shall file an application before the date of such withdrawal. He should make make an application, and effective withdrawal date of withdrawal shall be the date of intimation mentioned, but it has to be present year, cannot be a previous year. Same thing. Then denial. So when I opt for composition scheme, the officer can deny in following situations when the proper officer has reason to believe. Matlab he has sufficient reason to believe that the person is not eligible for composition scheme. not generally, but in special circumstances, because it's a very important thing that you're rejecting somebody's right to opt for composition, then the proper officer has a reason to believe that the person is not eligible or the person has contravened, then he can deny it. But before denying, he has to issue a show cause notice saying that I am rejecting your application. Reply should be filed by the taxpayer, and then the order will be passed by the officer saying that officer to pass an order accepting the reply or denying the option to pay tax under composition scheme. The effective date will be from a date which can be a retrospective date, which can be an old date. So I applied for cancellation today. It can be older than that also, right? Because the government knows that I've not satisfied the conditions, they can withdraw it from a very old date also. In all the three cases, the taxable person has to furnish a statement within 30 days. कि अगर गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से विड्रॉ होता है then fine, but if I opt for withdrawal, then within 30 days of the date of such withdrawal, I have to provide them a statement of stock held by me. Okay, so that is on composition scheme, registration, and withdrawal. If a person crosses the limit during the financial year, then from that point of time, he has to pay a high tax. Correct. Correct. If a person is registered under GST, but later he wants to switch to composition, it is possible. Yes, it is possible only from 1st of April, not in between the year. A person is registered in, say, 1st of April. Now he is doing a normal registration. Okay. And he wants to go for composition. He cannot do it in between the year. He has to wait for next February. In February, he has to make an application that he wants to apply for composition. April, February, and March, the officer will give him the approval. Then from 1st April, he can be under composition. Take another scenario. Now you have registered under composition. आपको हिचकी आ गई और आप बीच में ही composition से निकलना चाहते हैं, saying that नहीं, it's an extra cost for me and I'm not getting credit, so I don't like it. I want regular scheme. नहीं होगा. Once you are under composition, you can actually go, because withdrawal there's no limit. From the day you want to opt out, you can make an application and say you want to opt out of it. Opt out हो जाएगा. Composition से opted out करने के बाद regular registration बन जाएगा. Yes, you will get a normal regular registration. There is a file, any form for opt out of composition. Yes, they have to file a form for opting out of composition. CMP1, CMP2 is there that they have to file. When what will happen to stock if he opted out? Yeah, because in composition scheme, you cannot claim input tax credit, but under regular scheme, you can claim. That's why they give you this, saying that आपको 30 days में आपका stock declare करना पड़ेगा. He has to furnish a statement within 30 days, because from whom he purchased, whether that person is charged, all of that records he will have to maintain. So there is a time limit given of 30 days, saying that within 30 days, you maintain all of these records and then make an application, so that on that stock, you are not getting ITC under composition, but regularly you have to get, so on that stock, whatever is the tax component, that you will get the input tax credit. Is a composition scheme eligible in both the case of interstate and intrastate? No, only in case of intrastate. Once he makes an interstate supply, he is out of composition. He cannot make an interstate supply. If a person once out of the composition, again, can he opt in? Yes, he can opt in. No restriction. He can opt in. Sir, can every businessman take GST credit? Bada business ho ya chota? Yes, everybody can take it. If interstate supply is restricted, why it is included in calculation of aggregate turnover? Because you might have been not doing it this year, but if this is your first year, last year, if you're doing in any interstate supply, that I will include for my aggregate turnover, no? Because aggregate turnover has to be calculated for this year as well as for previous year. So in the previous year's turnover limit, if it is less, for that purpose, I will include my exempt supply and the interstate supply also. What is the procedure for converting from normal to composition? You have to file a form, and once it gets approved, you can go for composition scheme. Revision के लिए book से कुछ समझ नहीं आता, take explanations from here, you will understand it. Can the person opt out of composition without filing or completing the quarter? Yes, he can go it in between also. So Up till the last quarter, till the date when he opts out, he has to pay taxes on that. What is the benefit? We have discussed the benefit: quarterly returns, quarterly payment, monthly returns, no input tax credit. So many benefits are there, right? Now we'll see some questions saying that what have you understood in the whole deliberation? Okay. Mr. A is obtained a registration of casual taxable person to make a display in exhibition. His turnover from the exhibition is 15 lakhs. Whether Mr. A is eligible for composition. Can composition purchase from interstate? Yes, he can purchase. He cannot supply, but he can purchase. Opt out anytime? Yes, opt out can be anytime. Turnover from all businesses under same PAN to be considered. Yes, turnover from all businesses under same PAN to be considered. Yes, you people are saying yes, you people are saying no in first case. People who are saying yes, please give me with reasons, and people who are saying no, also give me with reasons. Okay. Many people are saying yes, and many people are saying no also. Equally balanced. Okay. And people are saying no, yes, because the limit is below 1.5 crores. You're absolutely right. And people are saying no, they are casual taxable person, so you cannot register. They are also right. So the correct answer is it is a casual taxable person, so you cannot claim it. Mr. A is not eligible as casual taxable person or specifically excluded. So he's a casual taxable person. Just don't see the limit. See his criteria also. If he's a casual taxable person, he cannot opt for composition at all, even if it is limit is very low. Just don't see the limit, see the person also. Next question, can the opposition composition scheme be availed if the taxable person has interstate inward supplies? गुंजन कुमार, सब अगर एक बिजनेस में अलग अलग बिजनेस है उसके लिए सेपरेट रजिस्ट्रेशन या सभी के लिए एक ही रजिस्ट्रेशन? सभी के लिए आप एक ही रजिस्ट्रेशन ले सकते हो, या आपके अलग अलग बिजनेस है और आपको बिजनेस वाइज अलग रजिस्ट्रेशन लेना है तो आप अलग भी रजिस्ट्रेशन ले सकते हो। कंपल्शन नहीं है, ऑप्शनल है। अगर आपको चाहिए कि आप अलग अलग बिजनेस वर्टिकल्स के लिए अलग लेना चाहते हो तो आप अलग भी ले सकते हो। Second one is yes, but the reason what they're giving, he's not a casual taxable person. Yes. Forget casual taxable or no. If the restriction is only on the outward supplies, on inward supplies, there is no restriction. So the composition scheme is applicable subject to the condition that the taxable person does not engage in making interstate outward supplies while there is no restriction on making any interstate inward supplies. So inward supplies can be from a interstate purchase also. Mr. A is registered in Rajasthan who is selling goods from Rajasthan to Gujarat. Turnover of A is 73 lakhs in the preceding financial year. Whether Mr. A is eligible for composition. And also answer whether your answer will change if Mr. A is making purchases from Gujarat and selling goods in Rajasthan. Very, very varied questions, varied answers. Composition scheme is available. No, can be availed as interstate inward supply is not eligible. Okay. Interstate outward, no composition scheme. Okay, this is not correct. So few people are giving the correct answer, saying that from Rajasthan, if he is selling in Gujarat, okay, then he is not eligible because he's making an interstate outward supply. But if Mr. A is making purchases from Gujarat, then he is eligible because there is a restriction on outward inward supply, not on any inward interstate supply. So that's why he will not be available to claim credit, but okay, he is not eligible when he is making a outward interstate supply. Question number 4. Mr. A is a non-resident taxable person in running a ready-made garment showroom in Rajasthan. Turnover of the preceding financial year was 70 lakhs. Whether he is eligible for opt for composition scheme. Very good. No, he is not eligible because we know, but some people are saying yes, it is eligible. But see, yet again, like how we had question number 1 saying that he's a casual taxable person. Similarly, non-resident also cannot offer composition scheme. So a casual taxable person and a non-resident both cannot opt for composition scheme, even if their limit is below 1.5 crores. Question number 5. Mr. A is a dealer who is selling goods which are leviable to GST, exempt goods, and non-taxable goods. His turnover in the preceding financial year is 110 lakhs, 20 lakhs, and 30 lakhs, respectively. This is whether Mr. A is eligible for composition scheme. Question number 5, not visible. Yeah, here's the question. Mr. A is a dealer who is selling goods which are liable to GST, exempt goods, and non-taxable goods. His turnover in the preceding year is 110 lakhs, 20 lakhs, and 30 lakhs, respectively. Whether Mr. A is eligible for composition scheme. Aditi is saying Mr. A is eligible. Aparna is also saying yes, he is eligible. He is eligible because his turnover is crossing up. If his turnover is crossing, then he is not eligible. No, because 1.5 is not the minimum limit. 1.5 is a maximum limit. If he's touching 1.5 crores, then he cannot opt for composition. Mitesh, your question, if somebody is buying from another state to our shop located in a particular state, then what will be the situation? So it will be the situation of where the goods are getting moved. If a person is selling at his shop, then for him it is intra-state supply because you're taking the delivery there itself. If you want him to deliver to your state and you agree that you will deliver it there and you want the credit in your state, then you will tell it is an interstate movement. You will give your GST of that state. Then it will be an interstate transaction. But you say, okay, it doesn't matter that I will not give you GST of my state. You just give me a give me this. Then he will start CGST as GST as an intrastate supply. Because he's selling exempted goods, no, that's not the criteria. A composition dealer can sell exempted goods also, no problem. Yes, so he can opt. How are you saying yes, he can opt? The correct answer is this. Aggregate turnover includes all types of supplies made by all persons, which is registered under single PAN. So if a person is dealing in selling the goods which are not liable to tax, he is not eligible to opt for composition scheme. If he's selling only goods which are not liable, but if he's selling all, then we have to see the aggregate turnover. In case aggregate turnover exceeds 150 lakhs, because 110 plus 20 makes it 130, plus 30 makes it 160. Since he is dealing in goods which is more than 150 lakhs, so he cannot opt for composition. So he has to pay tax. He's not eligible for composition scheme because the total turnover is crossing 1.5 crores. Next is Mr. A is selling goods through e-commerce operator and turnover of the preceding financial year was 71 lakhs. Whether Mr. A is eligible for composition. Hmm. If he's supplying exempted goods, then how is it leviable to GST? The question is not whether he's eligible or not, is not whether he has to pay tax or no. Question is whether he is eligible for composition scheme. In the preceding year, he was making these supplies 110 of taxable supplies, 20 of exempted goods, and 30 of non-taxable goods. So what is the problem there? Nothing. So total turnover includes all of this. So we will consider all of this. The question is correct. Most of you are giving correct answer. The correct answer is that he cannot claim because he is making a transaction through e-commerce. So the condition said that you should not make interstate supply. You should not make any supplies through an e-commerce operator. Since his limit is 1.5 crores, that will not become the criteria. Since he starts making supply through e-commerce, he's out of it. A person has two establishments, one in Uttarakhand and Jharkhand, Uttarakhand and Rajasthan. The turnover in Rajasthan is 60 lakhs and turnover in Uttarakhand is 30 lakhs. He wants to opt for composition scheme in Rajasthan. Whether he can do so? Turnover is calculated on one pan. Yes, that's right, Mr. Ashok. Remember, when you answer this question, everybody is aware. Most of you are giving answers already. That's right. Uttarakhand is under those special category states where the limit is 75 lakhs. And Rajasthan is a normal state where the limit is 1.5 crores. So limit for Rajasthan is 1.5 crores. What much is the turnover for Rajasthan? 60 lakhs, below 1.5 crores. What is the limit for Uttarakhand? 75 lakhs. There it is also less than 75 lakhs, 30 lakhs itself. So then do you think he can opt for composition in that case? 7 not eligible because he's making interstate supply. Where is he making interstate supply? The question is not on interstate supply because he's not making any interstate supply. It is within the state itself. The turnover in Rajasthan is 60 lakhs, turnover in Uttarakhand is 30 lakhs. So nowhere they've said that it is an interstate supply. They're saying that it is the turnover what they have in those respective states. Yes, he can because turnover is less than 1.5, not eligible. It has interstate supply. No, it does not have interstate supply. Others are saying yes, he can. Yes, he can because aggregate turnover in one pan of all registrations does not cross 1.5 crores. Okay. Yes, if he has separate pan for each state, he can have. No, he has one PAN, not separate PAN. The question itself is that a person has two establishment. PAN is given is person wise. PAN is definitely not given establishment wise. Correct, Ashok. Correct. Ashok is given a correct answer. Neenat Desai has also given a correct answer. He can opt. Okay. So most of the people are saying that he can. But consider the answer that to calculate the limit, you will have to see the turnover of the respective state. I've told you, Uttarakhand, the limit is 75 lakhs, and Rajasthan, it is 1.5 crores. So his aggregate turnover for previous year on his permanent account number for his PAN was more than 75 lakhs because we calculate aggregate turnover all India basis. All India basis is turnover is 90 lakhs, which is more than 75 lakhs. So he cannot opt for composition scheme for the state of Uttarakhand, correct? Since he cannot opt for Uttarakhand, Uttarakhand limit is 75 lakhs. So, and he's crossing aggregate turnover of 75 lakhs because the aggregate turnover is all India PAN basis. Since he's crossing for Uttarakhand, he cannot opt for composition scheme in Rajasthan, even though in Rajasthan this is less. If one PAN, under one PAN, you have multiple branches. Now, if you opt for composition scheme for one branch, other scheme cannot be for composition, not possible. Once you opt for composition, all India basis, all your location should be under composition. And in Uttarakhand, since you cannot opt for composition, all other state also, you cannot opt for composition. So since in one state he cannot opt, in all other states he cannot opt because one state composition, two state non-composition, that is not possible. If he has taken a composition, all of his branches in the state has to take composition scheme. Or if he does not take composition, if he takes regular, all the branches should take regular scheme. In Uttarakhand specifically, why, even though in that state it is less than 30 lakhs, we cannot still give him composition because the composition is all India turnover. Okay, all India turnover. Uttarakhand specifically, I've kept it below the limit and Rajasthan below the limit so that you get properly confused. So it's where a lot of people said, yes, he can. But aggregate turnover is all India basis. Correct. When anyone having two or more establishments in one or more states, then aggregate turnover should satisfy the limit. Correct. Aggregate turnover should be seen there in that basis. Correct. So these were the questions on our discussion. I have also mentioned a lot of multiple choice questions. I will upload this with answers. You see that these are all discussions what we have had. From this, you will get to know understanding of the law. So any questions you have in respect of charge, that is reverse charge and forward charge and composition supply, you could ask now if you have some, else you can ask in next class as well. Sir, composition is on PAN basis or business basis. Composition aggregate turnover is on PAN basis. And composition registration, once you opt for the whole, it's also on PAN basis because one city or one unit you opt for composition, then all the units has to be under composition. If one unit is under regular scheme, then all will be under regular scheme. So many points to remember. Yes, very much points to remember, specifically on RCM. Composition, you will get used to it, but on RCM, please read through it so that you can remember it for a deeper, for a longer period. Notes on supply also. Notes on supply also. Okay, I will do that. Why question 5 is saying supplying leviable to GST when exempted supply? It's very confusing. Question number 5 is saying that a dealer is selling goods which are leviable to GST, exempted goods, and non-taxable goods. So he is dealing in three types of goods. He can deal, right? He can deal in three different types of goods. One is he's dealing in GST, goods which are leviable to GST, that is up to 110 lakhs, exempted goods to the extent of 20 lakhs, and non-taxable goods to the extent of 30 lakhs. So he's dealing with three category of goods. Now tell whether it is eligible for composition. That is the question. Clear, Abdul? Is your doubt clear now? These notes, I will share you the PPT. This itself, from this, you will read it and make your own notes. Okay. Thanks for acknowledging Nagaraju, Preeti, and Sangeeta Vani. If a dealer is a trader, then what? If it's a dealer is a trader, then the limit is 1.5 crores. Okay. So thank you very much. I know this was a very lengthy subject and a lot of things to remember, but I tried to go slow. That's why you'll see that somewhere you would have lost the connect, but read it again and you will understand this clearly. What is the difference between non-taxable and exempt goods? Non-taxable goods like petroleum products are outside GST, so they are not taxable. Exempted goods are those goods which are exempted under GST. Okay, like some goods like agriculture products, fruits are exempted, right? So those are exempted, and non-taxable are which is not taxable itself. Five petroleum products, alcoholic for liquor for human consumption. These products are non-taxable goods. Okay, thank you very much.